Hello, everybody. I'm your host, Josh DeArchon, and tonight I'm super excited for tonight's guest. He's a good friend of mine, and I will bring him up soon. But what I want to do before I do all that is I want to thank everybody who's within the comments section who wished to come on through tonight and listen into our conversation. So thank you very much for coming on through. It really, I do appreciate it. The second thing that I want to do is let everybody know that the Atheist Uprising is slowly but surely, uh, it's not changing its narrative, but we are going to start going into an interview based type system. And tonight is going to be our very first interview with my personal friend who I'm excited to have on. And let me actually bring him on right now. So, everybody, I wish to welcome on to the Atheist Uprising, Scott Williamson.
Hey,
Scott Williamson,
what's up, man?
how are you doing, Scott
Triangles
Williamson?
to you.
Damn right. How are you doing?
I'm hanging in there, man. Doing my thing every day.
Right, making sense, making sense. So, how about just for everybody who's here, right? Let's just kind of let them know who you are. So, who is Scott Williamson?
I am a mall clown during the day, and then I sell balloons at night. That's who I am. That's what I do, and I love it. I just love it. No, I'm just kidding. No,
Beautiful.
actually, I'm just the normal guy. I try to have fun, try to enjoy life, take things lightly, not too seriously, but at the same time, address things that are serious. So I have two channels, and two of the things that are really serious for me are music and conservative principles. So for me, I have two channels, YouTube podcasts. One is called Electro Live, and what I do is I interview, legends and pioneers in electro music, like electronic music, freestyle music, bass music, and hip hop music. So that's one thing that I do. And then the other thing is that I have a show called Conservative Principles with Scott and Sophia, and she's out in the audience watching us. So what's up, Sophia? Hey,
How
hey,
you
hey.
doing?
And so we just talk about certain conservative principles versus progressive principles. We have guests on our show. We interview, we debate, we have all kinds of conversations about things, all in a light manner. We are very all about compassion and reaching out and not, discriminating against minorities, whether that be, blacks, Mexicans, any sort of racial person, as well as homosexuals, trans people, you name it. We're not about that. We're not about that. And a lot of times when people think of conservatism, they think of those negative aspects where Republicans may be against, black people or, however you see it, And we just want to bring a voice to that, we're not about that. You can be conservative and be an atheist. You can be conservative and be a non-believer, a mystic, whatever you call yourself, you can do it too. You don't have to be a Christian.
Right, absolutely. And I would completely agree. Even myself, I have conservative principles in and of my own.
Yep, I know.
But it's kind of like melded in with certain, what individuals would say, certain progressive views as well, right? But the thing is that I think that if one is only one side or the other fully, you're not really understanding what politics or how people should interact with each other to begin with is like. Because as soon as you delve into one camp and fully delve into one camp, the problem is that now you have become relativistically doctrinal in a sense. You are underneath the said doctrine of that said belief system, and anybody who does not believe in that now is a threat, or now is an enemy, or now the situation is, right? Yeah. So I think in order to really go beyond the line, right, when we talk about politics or even when we talk about religion, you need to kind of put yourself in a position where you are able to have as you stated, these type of conversations that
Mhm.
kind of bridge the gap, which
Yeah.
is there, right? In order to either try to change people's minds or in order to try to show individuals that you might have a perception of something, but that said perception doesn't necessarily mean that all people who are underneath this thought process think that way.
Perfect.
Oh,
Perfect.
absolutely, absolutely. So I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you, and your show is called Conservative Principles, correct?
With Scott and Sophia,
With
my
Scott and
co-host.
Sophia. So
Yeah.
anybody who's within the comments section, please check out the description below. We have the show down there. So please check out the description below. It is Conservative Principles with Scott and Sophia.
Yeah.
I've watched a couple of shows. They are really good. I'm actually enamored by the show itself. So I think you
Wow.
guys
Thank
are doing fantastic, and I continue
thank
going because
thank
I really think that you guys are hitting something. You're hitting something that is integral within
right.
the
Thank you.
exactly, exactly.
We have to learn how to communicate. And a lot of these things, religion, politics, they're hard to talk about.
Mm,
They trigger people. People are very embedded in their ideas and wed to their ideas, and they identify personally with their beliefs. And so it's good to kind of get people into a different mode of thinking to say, hey, we can question anything. It's not about us, it's about our belief. And hey, if we want the truth can stand any question. No matter how rigorous the question is, the truth will always stand on its own. So there's nothing to fear if you're after truth.
exactly. You're absolutely right. And I think that the thing that individuals are more afraid of is the questions, because the more that questions are being asked, the more your fundamental values slowly but surely start to crumble in the sense if you don't have something solid that you're standing on. But as soon as you have something that you're standing on, solid that you're standing on, you can withstand any type of questions or all type of currents that are coming in your general direction. So I completely agree with you on that statement.
Yeah,
I
man.
think that questions are a beautiful thing, and those who are afraid of questions are afraid of the changes that might come when one really starts to think about the questions that are being stated, in a sense.
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
So let's start off with how did you get to this point at this very moment with two YouTube channels which are doing, as I stated, Conservative Principles is fantastic. I love it. And plus with your music show, which I also love as well, Electro Live, which
Mhm.
is extremely good as well because I like electro music. I'm not gonna lie.
Mhm.
So I like these two aspects, but what was the journey that brought you from the point where you were at to where you are now?
Wow, such a great question because it's like a movie in my mind. I always replay it because
Mm,
it's so true and it's so weird how this all came about. But back when I was in California, because I relocated here to Florida, I was
okay.
in California when you met me, if you remember.
Yes.
And
Yes.
when I was there, I was unemployed for some time,
Mm,
for a few months at one point, and I was always watching YouTube videos like debates, and I just got into this whole the Christian versus atheist debate,
mm,
right? And I was just into that and into spirituality and into all these sort of topics and subjects and consciousness and the mind and all of these kind of things. And so I just felt like I joined the EA show, the Empathetic Atheist,
right.
and Justin was the guy that ran that show. And
Yes.
so I had joined, and then I connected onto Facebook, and that's where I met all you guys. Through
Mhm.
that way, I met you there. I met everybody there, and I started showing up. Justin said, "Why don't you show up? Come on the show. We could talk. Hear your." And I did a few little shows. I think he was doing a Bible study once a week, and I went to the Bible study and was participating in that. And then I reached out to Justin And I said, hey man, I would really like to try my hand at debates. I've watched some of your debates, and I think that would be fun. That'd be something to do. And he's like, sure, man, we can do it. Who do you want to debate? I think my first guy was Adam. His last name is Adams.
Matt Adams?
Matt Adams, that's it.
Yes.
You remember that because you were there for that.
Yes, I was. Yes, I was.
So we did that debate, and then it went into debating other people like Victor Vargas.
Oh.
You remember? Alejandro. Sorry, if you're out there watching, I'm sorry to be laughing. It's just it was thrilling. It was thrilling.
Oh yeah, the big time, majorly thrilling, some would say.
Yeah. So I just started doing that, and I evolved with you guys on the Promethean secular frontier. And we were doing, of course, I was guest modding on different shows, and then I think I did my own show, like the Exploring Epistemology with Scott Williamson show, and we did another one too. Yeah, Live Debate Channel, I think, was one.
Yes. Yeah.
And so that's just led to that. And then I kind of said, well, why don't I start my own channel? It's about time that I get my feet wet. I've kind of trained a little bit here with these guys. I think my training is over. I think I could probably do this myself. And I started doing it. I said, well, what do I really want to make this about? Do I want to do another atheist channel, or what do I really want to do? And I was like, nah, I think I want to explore music. So I just focused on music and built that thing up, and met so many people in the music industry that were my personal heroes. Like, fortunately for me, I knew a guy who was he is the head of the Hip Hop Museum in Washington. So he inducts people into the Hip Hop Hall of Fame. So this guy knows everybody. And he's an editor for LL Cool J's magazine, Rock the Bells. This is who he was. And I knew him because I grew up with the guy in Virginia. And we've always remained friends. So when I told him I'm trying to do my channel, he kind of introduced me to this person and that person. He said, just make friends with him. They'll see you're a common friend with me. So obviously they're going to accept your friendship because they know me. So I did that, and I started meeting all these people and just asking them, hey, would you like to be on my new podcast? And they were all like, sure. Jay was on there, the guy that hooked me up. He was on there.
Right.
So it's been a lot of fun, and it's been growing and growing. It kind of slowed down now because I'm kind of like out of contacts. But I have a few people right now scheduled. They're just trying to check their schedules and do stuff. But
right.
So I was, and as that died down, I said, well, let me start, the conservative thing. I started thinking about that. And I went on to Facebook in the Fight on the Fence group, and I met my partner, Sophia. She was like outspoken and held a lot of commonalities as far as that topic is concerned. And so I approached her and I said, hey, would you like to be a co-host of mine on a new podcast I'm doing on YouTube? And she was like, yeah. And we both came up with the name of the show. We come up with ideas every week, and we go through reaction videos, and you've seen the show. And so we just plan that stuff out, and that's what got me here. So that's where we are right now.
Wow. That's a really, because as you stated, like the development just from like, okay, I'm watching YouTube videos, I'm watching debates and everything like that. And even with me, because I was steeped within the atheist movement, I would say around like 2000 and I don't know. I forget what it was. I think it was like 2015, and then after continued on into 2016, and then after I slowly but surely started to drop out of it because I started to realize that there wasn't really anything that was tangible for me, right? To continue to go into these debates for. I always felt that there was something amiss. There was something not there in the beginning. So I kind of tapered off and started doing my own things. But when it's really weird because when I was about to say the bubonic plague, when COVID hit, the and everybody had to stay home, that's when I was like, well, let me see what the atheist scene is like now. And that's where slowly but surely through looking at the content and everything like that, I started to see that, oh, okay, well, now we're starting to get somewhere where beforehand we weren't really in the place that I thought we needed to be. And from that point, I ran into Justin's channel and we really started to delve into, and I like the way that he carried his channel along with Wes. So I was thinking, you know what? Well, maybe I should jump in and just see what the circumstances were. And he was having these open mic interactions some point. So I ended up jumping on and having discussions and everything like that. And slowly but surely, it just led to one road after another, meeting incredible people such as yourself and so many other individuals along the way. And for me as well, I started to realize like, hey, there is something that I know would be beneficial if I created my own channel afterwards, because I can interact with it in my own personal way in order to give the viewers, but at the same time, give the guests something that is new in a sense. And that's what I always wanted to do, is bring something that was new to the forefront, new to the table. And I feel like our stories are relatively the same. It was kind of like we're watching YouTube videos, we get wrapped up into this movement. Both of us were kind of enamored by what the EA show was doing, and from there it just rolled into where we are today. So it's been one hell of a ride. That's for damn sure. One hell of a ride.
A lot of drama in between. I was telling Sophia, she wasn't really used to the whole YouTube thing, and she's just starting, now. And I was telling her, yeah, you're gonna realize, like, on these YouTube channels, there's a lot of personalities that you can run into, a lot of weird people, and a lot of strange drama happens. But you meet a lot of great people, like you said. I met you, and that was a great connection I would have never made if I hadn't have done what I did, and vice versa. So, I mean, being online like this, it is one thing they say that the internet has sort of connected us together in really profound ways,
Absolutely.
Big sense.
Absolutely. Now, the other thing that I wish to ask, because at the moment you are an atheist, I still believe, like a conservative but atheist, or are you like?
I guess, I can't, I'm like, I know this sounds stupid. I hate labels. I mean, I know that sounds.
It makes sense. It makes sense.
But the thing about it with me, I would say that I'm still a pantheist, but that's a subset of atheism, because I'm not really believing in this personal God type of situation. Like, and it's not a scientific claim or anything like that. My pantheism is more philosophical, and it's mainly just to say that whatever the gods can, explain, so can nature. There's some unknown property of nature that could have started the whole process of evolution and matter and time and space. And so in that sense, it's replacing God with nature, with some unknown property, some weird, mysterious property of nature. And I think all scientists sort of assume that in their investigation. That's why they keep digging deeper and deeper into the nature of reality. And, scientists, many like Sean Carroll, different scientists will tell, theoretical physicists rather, would say, that nature actually, time and space, emerges from something more fundamental. Some structure could be like a quantum field, like a mathematical probability distribution.
Right.
That's the same as God. It's timeless, spaceless, everywhere, all powerful. It meets the definition. So while I'm not saying this as a scientific fact of the matter, I'm just saying that philosophically it works, especially in the conversation and when you talk about things like God and stuff like that. Exactly. So I found it very useful, in my life in that way. And plus I do have awe, and I do see some truth in all religions. The golden rule, I can grant that. And so in that sense, I'm a all theist, theism, that in the sense that, you can find some truth in all religion, but I can also see nature as replacing God, the God, man, sky daddy type of God,
Right. Right. And put nature in there for that said substitute, which I do understand, and which I think that more individuals, or I think that that's kind of the path that one goes down in a sense in order to be more open-minded in a sense. And that's what I really like, is that beforehand you came from a Jehovah's Witness background, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, correct.
Right. So the story from Jehovah's Witness into now the pantheist, what was the thing that kind of brought that about? Was it more like the questioning of one's faith that really brought you to where you are right now? Or is it more the like there was inconsistencies within the faith and within the belief that brought you here, rather than just questions that weren't necessarily answered?
Yeah. What I would say about that is, the funny thing is, like, from the time I started studying with Jehovah's Witnesses to the time I became baptized and throughout the whole thing, I had major doubts from the beginning. Like, it wasn't like I didn't have doubts. What I was doing was I was putting the doubts aside and kind of weighing their relevance, like saying, well, you got to understand, like, I was a young guy. I was living in a poor neighborhood, and I had a girlfriend that was my high school sweetheart. And we were having communication problems. Like, I was a very angry kid and didn't know how to express myself at all. Like, I had no way to talk to people in the right way. And I was always like in fighting and violence and stupid things, And so at that particular time, we lived in our neighborhood. A lot of people were Jehovah's Witnesses. Like, Jehovah's Witnesses used to knock on every door, like, every day in our neighborhood. And so I met some folks and started talking to the guy. His name was Prince Harris, and his wife. And we just kicked it off. Number one, we kicked it off personally because he was an older guy and he seemed very strong, like a strong, manly kind of guy. And that's something that I really resonated with, because my father was like that. And that's how I understood my, people that I respect to be that way. Right. And he was a very, very straightforward, very intelligent, very measured. And I appreciated that. And I was like, man, I'd like to be like that one day. He's cool. He wears his clothes nice, and he's a guy, you know what I mean? Right. And that's just how I was thinking at the time. And so I started studying the Bible with him happily. I was like, yeah, just come on. I love you being here. Like, I like your energy, Right. And so we got along, and he, and I just went, everything he told me to do, I just did it. And I told him my problems, like all my temper problems, my marital problems. And he stepped in and he was like, look, man, you need to be a man, Scott. You need to stop. The Bible says, let your yes mean yes and your no, no. That means you don't have to scream. You don't have to repeat yourself. You're a man, Scott. Be a man. Be grown up. If you don't want to do this, you say no. And that's the end of the story. There's no need to argue about it, and be a man in the sense that you're patient. and understanding. Listen to your wife. Maybe she knows better than you. Maybe she has a better idea. Try to open up and be strong. Don't be scared of that. Just accept her. She's your wife. She's your partner. Let her be that partner you need. Don't reject it. Maybe she's right. And so I was like, okay, and I tried all of these things and it worked. It's like it really helped my family life. And we met friends, like people in the congregation that were very loving and things like that. And I was bad on money at the time. So if something happened, Prince would come by and say, look, man, if you need money, if you need anything, Scott, pick up the phone and call me. If I don't have it, I'll get it. We'll get it from the congregation. We'll get you. We'll take care of you. And he did. When things really got bad, man, the brothers used to come over, and take care of me, man. Like it was like such community and family,
right?
That I felt, and I felt supported, and my family felt supported, and we felt like, wow, we finally found a strong, something true, something real. These people are real,
right? Like they're not somebody who just talk. It's not like, oh, I'll help you out, and then you never hear from them again or whatever. They're there, no matter what. They're always there. Yeah.
Yes. And so it was very difficult, but I mean, at the time I did have doubts. I mean, I had common sense. So a lot of these stories just didn't make a whole lot of sense. And especially the thing about slavery, because slavery with Jehovah's Witnesses has a spiritual meaning to it too, though. It's something that parallels to, the sacred and discreet slave is mentioned in the New Testament, anyways, not important. But when I heard about the slavery and I read about the laws and stuff like that, it just made me think, that doesn't resonate with my values. But then I was told that it's not your values that are important, it's the values of God, because you wouldn't have values if it weren't for God. Like God makes it possible for you to reference anything as bad and good. So he's the one who initiated slavery, and they always kind of, swept it under the rug and, oh, this was about indentured slavery, like the good kind of slavery. But
exactly, right. I love whenever you read those type of textbooks. I love when you read biblical literature when it starts bringing up the slavery aspect, right? And then after they're like, no, but there's good kind and there's a bad kind. And biblical slavery was good because the person was being brought into the fold of the Christian fold, and that they were going to be saved anyways because they were Christians nonetheless. And you kind of start scratching your head like,
like, you sure? And then the ironic thing about that is even the so-called bad slavery actually exists too. The
right,
where it says go out into the nations and buy your slaves from the nations around you, and you can beat your slave as long as they don't die after a couple of days. They're your property.
Exactly.
These things caused me a problem. And then, everything else, like there's a passage in that talks about how if your virgin daughter is raped, that if you catch the man, the father can either have him killed or can have him pay him at least 50 shekels. Because the girl, his daughter, lost her value, so there's no way to get dowry from her because she's not a virgin. She's not as valuable anymore. So the father, they kind of looked at their daughters as commodities. Women looked at that way, and that caused me a problem, as well. And so there's just a lot of social things, but I never really made a big deal about it. I just said, maybe I don't understand. Maybe God's ways are higher than my ways.
Right. Likewise, I was on the same boat too. I used to think as well, maybe God's ways are much higher, maybe that I'm not understanding, where maybe all this is for some better good in the end. But slowly but surely, when you start to elaborate and start to see that this wasn't meant for today's day. This was meant for back then's day, which was a normacy to have some sort of that nations would enslave individuals from other nations in a sense.
Mhm.
And that's the only reason why that was relevant within the Bible and not changed at all, which is very interesting. But please continue. My
Well,
apologies.
I was just going to say that even slavery, God knew it was wrong because he freed his own people from Egypt.
Right.
And he said, don't lord over your brothers like you do the other slaves. Don't lord over your fellow Hebrews the way you do the other. So it's kind of saying it's wrong, but
Right.
you can do it to them.
Exactly. It's so baffling because on one hand it's saying it's not okay when you're dealing with God's chosen people, or at least if you do it, if they are inside like a debt and they have some sort of debt towards you, will be generous to them and everything like that. But those other nations, those are the ones that you can buy your
And
slaves from and beat
they
them
ain't
and everything.
nobody.
And you're just like, where's this going? What's happening
Exactly.
here?
So,
Right.
anyways, I became very zealous in it, man. I became,
Hmm.
not just knocking on doors every day that I could, that I was free. I was
Right.
going to all the meetings, and then I got promoted within the organization into sort of a leadership position of responsibilities and things like that.
Hmm.
And I was giving lectures on some Sundays, so I was writing stuff, doing public speaking, and I was, you know, debating with preachers and you know um, people from all like Black Hebrew Israelites,
Right.
people
Right.
like that in our community.
Hmm.
And so I was going at it with them. So I had a lot of debate skills kind of already building up as a young guy. But then, as it turned out, I just talked to a guy at work, and he was like a staunch atheist guy. And
Right.
he would always engage me about religion. And I was more than happy to debate with anybody. But I wasn't so used to dealing with an atheist that was very, on top of this, um, on top of his game like that. And the guy was doing street epistemology before that actually became a thing here. He was asking just really good questions that I couldn't answer. And I was going back thinking, and he asked me something. He says, well, if you don't know the answer, why are you convinced of it? Like, if you
Huh.
can't convince me, how are you convincing yourself? And it just made me think, and I was like, that's a good fucking question, to be honest with
Right. Exactly.
you.
Like, hmm.
I can't even come. I don't even have a comeback for that one. Like, like by definition, it's not going to happen. So that's the first. I think he provided the first cut in the chain,
Right.
and then after that, my doubts just started coming, and then I just, I was, I had a friend. Me and my wife had a friend named Tina.
Right.
She had a little young girl, and
Huh.
she had, she was working odd jobs trying to make it, and she was never at her house to take care of her baby, her little kid.
Hmm.
And so she had an elder come over and take care, but the elder ended up molesting the little girl, and it got back to the congregation. It all eventually came out, and then they confronted they wanted to get the lady's testimony,
Right.
and they caught her. She was smoking a cigarette because she was so nervous, and you're not supposed to smoke cigarettes. So they disfellowshipped her, but then they kept the guy that did the pedophilia. They just
Mm.
demoted him from elder. Like,
Wow.
and that was just it. I was like, this does not, if this is the kind of God you guys worship, then I just don't want no parts of it. You know what I'm saying? And that's what did it for me. Then
When
all the doubts I started entertaining all the doubts at that point. And I was like, yeah, let me check this out. Let me check out, is this really true? And I went to the library. I was studying all kinds of books on physics and history and this and that and evolution and all the things that they denied. The earth is 10,000 years old, dinosaur, dinosaurs and man lived together 6,000 years ago, and the flood and all, and it just all these doubts I already had, just
Right.
and it just moved me out. And I mean, I had ruined my marriage, ruined, I didn't have any family, anybody in the state at the time. And my only family was the congregation. But then
Right.
they couldn't talk to me. They weren't allowed to even talk to me.
Right.
And a lot of people were sad, and some people snuck around and talked to me, and they were just trying to get me back in. And I
Right.
was over,
It's crazy though when you really look, because I think that's where the Pandora's box is, right? Like as soon as somebody starts questioning, they're like, "Oh, this person needs to be out," because if they start making everybody else question, well, now that's going to be a problem. So
Mhm.
nobody should be talking to this individual, and if you do, then try to bring them back into the fold. Don't listen to what they're stating, just try to
Mhm.
bring them back into that general fold. And likewise happened with me as well once I left. So it's a- again, just hearing that, and definitely when you were talking about an elder doing something like that to somebody that young, or just doing something like that to anybody,
Mhm.
is not at all something that should be
Mhm.
looked over by the other elders, or however the hierarchy of
Oh
things
yeah,
work.
that's how it is. And it really turned me off, because these people, when they turned on me, these people became tyrants, man. Like they became
Mm.
very authoritative and very domineering,
Right.
because they then had to show their power on me. And the
Mm.
thing about that I realized, where I was different, is I wasn't really trying to use all of that religion stuff as power over other people. But these elders, that's what they were into. They were
Right.
into just having personal power and then lording it over people. And then if you disagree, I saw how fast they turned on, and they try to punish you in little ways. You know what I'm saying? In different ways. You
Right.
can't even question things. They get very offended. And this that whole mentality, just it made me feel sickening inside to be part of stuff like that. And that's the problem I even have till today, is that some religious people, I find they're very arrogant. They're very cocksure and certain of everything. And even if you disagree, or you try to show them a different way of thinking about things, like I'm not even asking you to abandon your belief, but just consider there's a different perspective, there's a different view that
Right.
maybe we can talk about, or that you can consider before you keep telling me I should listen to you. You know, listen to me too. I have a different perspective, and they don't want to hear it. It's like they shut you down every time.
Absolutely. And I think that's the worst thing, because then after you start getting into, or like how other atheists are, uh, the saying goes that, oh, well, you like being within your own closed bubble or
Mhm.
whatever. When in reality, I find that atheists are more ready to move front, and I wouldn't say combative, but I would say more talkative to the theists than the theists are towards anybody who's outside their lot,
Mhm.
in a sense. And that's why I really like the atheist movement a lot, even though I do find that there are certain issues, and I've had conversations based on those issues in previous shows.
Mhm.
But all in all, I think that the atheist movement is moving in the right way. It just needs to be tweaked a little more in order to benefit all those, no matter if one is conservative or if one is progressive. They should all be looked the same way until somebody does something which is actually detrimental to the health of those who are young, or those who are of a particular um, orientation, or
Of
something like
course.
that. Exactly.
Well, see,
Then,
what happens is, in my experience with a lot of atheists, is that, and this is just a human thing. It's a tribal thing. It's It's part of who we are. It's part of our evolution, is that we form groups and we become very tribal. And sometimes we're not very open-minded and we're not very inviting. And it's all about communication. Like, we can build bridges if we know how to communicate and give each other a chance without insulting each other's person, or at least being open to it. I mean, I know people are wired up different. Like, there's a lot of atheists that the way they're wired up, and they could have been very religious before they became atheists, but just because they're wired up a certain way, they gravitate towards, things like spirituality. Like, I've seen this. There's people, they want that sort of place in their life, but they already don't believe in God. They don't believe in, religion, of course, because it entails God. But they still have certain kind of beliefs, and they hold on to them, and they may be against, and then other atheists may, dig at them for that,
Exactly.
and vice versa. And everybody's like, well, nobody's really skeptical. Nobody's being a skeptic. Like, to be a skeptic, you have to start with, I don't know. And then you can start to learn. But as soon as you know every damn thing, it becomes a blind spot for you,
That's definitely true. And don't get me wrong, I do think that sometimes having certain uh let's just say opinions, or let's just say certain belief systems, do need to be, I think, fundamental for a person as
Mm-hmm.
well, right? So I do understand that a person who has some sort of fundamental belief in something, even within naturalism or whatever the situation may be, should be able and should be more, I would say, aggressive when individuals not question it, but when individuals are trying to say, well, look, this person's idea is nonsense, it should be like, no, and this is why. Bang, 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 bang. And you
Right.
list down
Fade it
so
out.
many things that
Yeah.
they're just like, I can't beat this, And that's the way that I think that naturalists should be, right? And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
sometimes you just like how I state, and people say, well, that's militaristic language. But a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times I say that there are certain instances where going up to the front lines and kind of going back and forth with somebody is good, but
Mm-hmm. Oh,
sometimes you
yeah.
need to break through those front lines, and sometimes you need to blitzkrieg through that and then circumvent the individuals in order to really show that, oh, well, the people that I thought knew things and that I put all my hopes into, I'm realizing that those individuals actually didn't have the knowledge that they claimed that they had. And I
Yeah.
think
And just maybe learn to say, we can agree to disagree. Like, if there's more progressive sort of leaning atheists, and then there's more conservative leaning atheists, they can just agree to disagree on that. The core thing, though, is with atheism, it's just about God. We don't
exactly.
believe in God for XX reasons. Some are agnostic atheists, some are hard atheists. Those guys don't have to, they can agree to disagree.
That is
Like,
true.
they're just wired up different. So I guess what I'm saying is that people have a right to be who they are. They can't help it. They're determined to be that way.
Mhm.
And it's okay. It's okay. It's like, we have to get into a more of a culture of being not so thin-skinned, if you will. Like,
Yes.
we have to be able to understand the world isn't here to make us feel better all the time. Sometimes the world shits on you.
Oh,
You have to embrace that and just get stronger.
yeah, yeah, and that's the thing that sometimes what I see with today's day, right, is that I see that sometimes we start leaning towards the area where it's like, oh, well, this and this and this hurt my feelings, and henceforth I want everybody to kind of care about that. And if you don't, well, now you're an enemy and you're this and you're that, and we should try to cancel you and all the rest of that stuff,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
But the reality is that should there be certain things that are cancelable, Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But should we be focusing on certain things if we know, let's just say there's comedic value, not comedic value to the thing that is being stated, but I'm saying that you're going to see a comedian, this comedian has um, either raunchy not raunchy views, but raunchy jokes, or sometimes jokes that kind of skim the border.
Mm-hmm.
Should we then look at all those individuals and say, well, you must change with the times? Or should we say that, well, these individuals we have grown up with? And in a sense, maybe we should understand that with certain jokes that are being stated, there's not an actual value which is meant to harm, hurt, or attack. It is more for comedic value that they state the things. And that's where, for me, for instance, that's where my kind of conservatism comes in, where it's like,
Right.
okay, there's going to be certain things that you're going to hear that's going to sound like, eek, okay, that was a bit, that seemed like it was a bit too far, but okay. I can understand that you got certain jokes that are amazing and certain jokes that are flawed.
Exactly.
Or whatever. But
Back when I was younger, like with hip hop music, they had a group called the Two Live Crew here in Florida.
okay.
And the Two Live Crew, what they did is they were very raunchy. Like
Right.
they'd get on stage and do a lot of raunchy stuff. And their songs were very explicit and nasty, nasty. So it was controversial, but it didn't really matter because the records were circulating in the bad neighborhoods, the hood in Florida.
Right.
Not a big deal. But as soon as those records started going gold and platinum and started circulating around the country, white kids and other kids were listening to the music, and it became a problem. Then it became a big issue all of a sudden.
Right.
And so then they tried to shut them down, like these Republicans were trying to shut them down to say, you can't say those words. They're offensive. They hurt people's feelings, blah, 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 blah. And they were arresting record shop owners here in Florida that were selling their records, arresting them, put them in jail for real. And then the Two Live Crew, they couldn't play concerts. And then finally it went to the Supreme Court and they ruled, hey, look, if you don't like what you're hearing, turn the channel. Or turn it, or don't buy it. If it offends you, don't go buy it.
Right.
like you have power in yourself. Like you don't
it's not like
need government to rule it.
Exactly.
So that's kind of where I'm coming from with all that, is that we have more power than we like to think. We have been conditioned over the years to think we need authority to tell us what to think, tell us what to believe, and tell us what offends us and what shouldn't offend us. And what that's doing is you can put a nice spin on it all you want, but at the end of the day, you're kind of killing yourself. Even the people who want that are kind of hurting themselves, because that same gun that they want the government to point at their enemy, next administration, it'll be pointed at you.
Oh, so, big time. Big time. You never know.
Yeah. So you don't want to play that game. You don't want to play that game. You want to actually learn that you have some say-so and control and sovereignty in the individual. And this is where, like, the same with religion. Like, if spirituality is your thing, you don't need a church or a religion to tell you to have authority over that part of your life. That's up to you. You're an individual. Whether you want to have spirituality or not, it doesn't matter. That's your life. It's your life. Nobody should be an authority over your life but you. At the end of the day, you're responsible for you in most things. Now, I understand that you need laws and you need regulations for a lot of things, but I think in principle, the core principle is to give power to the individual as much as possible that's reasonable. And we can talk about what's reasonable and what's not. That's where we have the discussion at. Exactly. But at least let's all agree that we want more freedom, not less. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Like, not to constrict individuals with, because it's very difficult when you start talking about society restricting, because it's difficult to even say what should be or not what should be restricted. Like already individuals know what should be restricted, what shouldn't be restricted within the realm of uh let's just say decorum when
Mhm.
individuals are speaking with each other for, I don't know, in a classroom or something like that. There's certain words that one should not use, which is understandable, I think. But when individuals start utilizing or building up on certain aspects of nouveau terminologies, and then are stating that individuals need to follow in line with these nouveau terminologies, and don't get me wrong, I'm okay with it.
Mhm.
But when it
Mhm.
starts getting a bit too far out there, that's when I start thinking, we need to start reining in shit again. We need to
Yeah,
start
and
bringing that
that
shit
can be handled on a cultural level. Like we can have the conversations and disagree and come to a agreement. But the my whole thing is, let's not get authority involved. Let's not get the government involved to where they say you can't use certain words or pronouns, for example,
mm,
because that would be bigoted. And because you're a bigot, you need to be fined or be put in jail, like over in Norway. It's
mm,
like you want to make sure that we have the principle in place at all times. Like we need to really protect our principles of free speech. That's a principle. Now, like if Katie, like, and I also want to give a shout out to Katie. I used to be on her show too, and we did things, and so I have friends that are trans people. But my
right,
only argument is, um, if someone doesn't choose to use a pronoun for some reason, it doesn't automatically mean that they're a bigot. It just means that they may have reasons, like maybe, let's say, in your mind, you always correlate gender with the social construct.
mm,
You know, the woman, man, that's a social construct, right?
mhm,
And that's correlated in language from the original Greek word. I forget what it was, but it means female. Male, female means man, woman. The adult is the some people understand it. It provides a lot of utility for their life, and they choose to use that in their
right.
everyday language. Now, because they do, does that make them a bigot necessarily? I don't think so. I think it just means that this is what they're used to. This is all new terminology. And this is like centuries and centuries and centuries we've always correlated the two.
Mm,
And so it doesn't make you a bigot. Now, it would kind of make you an asshole if someone who was a trans woman
right.
wants to be called a woman and you say, no, you're a man. That makes you an asshole because you're not very nice. But we have a right in America to be assholes all day long. America's full of them. Look at me. No, I'm just kidding.
Right. So actually, Linear has brought up a pretty good point.
Huh?
She stated that I don't know anyone who doesn't use pronouns. So she's confused. I, you, he, she, those are all pronouns. And Linear, I would completely agree. And that's why, for me, like I don't think necessarily the issue is the pronouns in and of themselves. I think
Mm-mm.
it's when the pronouns in and of themselves start to be utilized in a sense to target certain individuals, right? So for instance, if, and I'm not talking about like the Jordan Peterson types or whatever, where it's sort of like, okay, your students say, or your student who is a trans student says that they wish to be called a she or a he or whatever the situation is, and he says no. Well, right there, that is, in my opinion, might be a problem, obviously, because the person is asking you that could you please refer me to these specific pronouns or they or whatever other pronouns that are there. I think when we start really looking at the realm of these nouveau diverse pronouns, in a sense, like their, for instance, or what was the other one? I'm forgetting a couple of them, but there's some that seem to be outside the realm uh, of being realistic in a sense. I think that's where we start running into problems because any individual can just be like, well, I wish to be a fifreur or whatever. And it's like, well, what's that? Well, I don't know, but it's something that I associate with. So can you call
Hmm.
me that?
Yeah,
And
like
it's
where
just
do you
like,
draw the
okay, I
line?
can do that. But until I understand what that actually means, I don't want to be stating something that could be, I don't know, looked at in a negative light towards maybe other individuals that might have that same exact word, but it means, I don't know, a racial slur or something towards that
And
extent.
hey, in principle, I agree that Americans should have the right to use whatever language they want. Like if they want to use these pronouns, knock yourself out. I'm all for it, man. Do it. My only gripe is don't use the government to enforce them.
Mm,
Let's maintain our principle of freedom. Let's be able to do that. Let's be able to use whatever or not use whatever words we don't want to use. We're all individuals. We don't have to be hurt by that. That's not an attack.
agreed. Agreed. And I think that, but I think too, is the way, because as you stated, like a person can be a complete asshole when the person is just asking to utilize certain pronouns or whatever, and the person says, no, I will not. And then after tries to, I don't know, degrade the individual or whatever the situation may be, I think that's where we need to be careful, obviously,
Hmm.
because right there, the value is completely different now. Now you are literally trying to drag that individual through the mud for a specific pronoun that they wish to
And
use.
hey, again, I think culture does a really good job at putting the cap on that kind of stuff. Like, say, let's talk about the N word.
Mm,
The N word is not enforced. If you use the N word, you're not going to get arrested. You're not going to get a fine. Nothing's going to happen to you by the powers that be. But what will happen is you're going to be ostracized from society. You're
very
going to
true.
have all kinds of problems. You might get into physical altercations. You might get into you might lose your job. You might, there's all kinds of things that can happen just on a cultural level.
Right,
In a
right.
private level, a private company can fire you for that, and that's even a government company. Any company can fire you for that. So the thing is that we didn't need a law for that. We didn't need government intrusion on that. We handled that pretty good. And I
This
think the same is for any word, really. I don't see why any word would be any different.
I do see your point, and I do agree with that. But I think too, like there was connotations with that particular word that had uh, a historical negative that was on it because it was used to degrade the individuals rather than using it as what individuals sometimes use it today in order to kind
Hmm.
of how could I say it?
Take ownership of the word and
Exactly.
yeah, like,
Exactly.
and people can do that. That's not a problem for me. Like for me, whatever that's for culture to work out. And it seems like cultures come to a happy agreement. No one really worries about that so much like they did, say, I think like 10 years ago, or
Mm,
maybe even earlier than that. This has been a thing for a while, but
right.
I know in the 80s it was like, well, if black people can use the N-word, why can't the white people use the N-word? It's like that was a conversation you didn't need the government to fix for you. Like,
Right. Right. Good. That's actually a really good point. And I do agree, but I think sometimes the government not needs to step in, but I think in certain aspects there needs to be some sort of lead with new specific how could I say it? terminologies, right, that are out there, for instance. And I think that when we look at certain words or individuals that were, let's just say, persecuted in the past, the government was always the one that led the way in order to show individuals, look, this is what happens in a positive way. This is what happens when uh, you have certain individuals, like gay individuals, have rights and so on and so forth. Nothing horrible happens. It's not like it's some sort of disease. It's not whatever the situation is. Like, these individuals are truly just people wanting to be realized as individuals, right? And I think that sometimes the government does need to take that lead and does need to take that step forward, in a sense, in order to show the people that, okay, well, maybe our ideas are misconceptions, in a sense. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying all things. I'm just saying with some things where culture hasn't necessarily worked its way around it yet, sometimes I do think that government needs to put that first foot forward in order to show,
Do
like,
you
look.
think do you think that the government has some higher nobility and um, perspective, like a better perspective on things than your average person? Because it
I
seems like that.
The thing that I would say is not that the government has some sort of nobility, but I think that a lot of people look to the government, even though that they might despise it for certain reasons. We still look towards our government as sort of like our representatives, right?
Hmm.
And sometimes for those to be representatives, or for a government to represent what their people or their constituents, I should say, should act in other things underneath nouveau terminologies, or maybe even underneath nouveau um, perspectives, is that they need to take that first foot forward. It's kind of like if we look at Dwight Eisenhower, for instance. He was the first one that actually broke the segregation within schools and stuff like that. But if Eisenhower wouldn't have done that in the first place and wrote those amendments within the laws of Mississippi and so on and so forth, I don't think that Mississippi would have changed that much based on the cultural value, right? So
Hmm.
I do think that sometimes the government does need to take the lead in order to kind of show the people, look, there's nothing that bad that's going to happen. This is the situation that needs to be shown to the people so that the people can start to relax, process, and then say, okay, I might have been wrong based on the assessment and the that I had on these particular individuals, and so on and so forth. So it's not that they have a sense of nobility. I just think that they have a lot of people look to the government in order to make their decisions sometimes. And I think that when the government does a quote unquote good move, is beneficial for the society to see.
Yeah. And the government is a republic, so it
Exactly.
is representative. So it represents the people.
Mhm.
And like you're saying, like with word usages, of course, words evolve. That's what words do. They evolve because culture and people evolve. So
Mhm.
everything starts with individual people. And so the words we use, the culture we have is always reflected in our institutions, our governments, all of that. So these word uses, all of this stuff sort of happens naturally. Where the danger may be, and I always am measured when it comes to any kind of government expansion.
Mhm.
Like when government expands into anything, it's taking more and more space in your personal life because now these words can be regulated. Say, for example, suppose the government stepped into that arena
Mhm.
and said, we think we should take the lead and say, you know what? I think that saying, this word or that pronoun out of offending, or if it offends somebody, there should be a fine imposed on you.
Mm.
Well, they've taken a little bit of your freedom right there. I mean, even if you're not the kind of person that would ever offend people, but you may accidentally offend somebody. As you pointed out, some words now, pronouns, are you haven't even heard of them before. They might like say flu. I'm a flu. I want to be known by that. You don't know what that is. You don't even know what it means.
Right.
And now you have to go along with whatever the hell that means. So they've taken away your right to think about whether you want to understand what it is. It's like, it's always a bit of there's always a trade-off. It's not saying that one's better than the other. It's just a big trade-off. You're trading off a little bit of your rights to get a little bit of maybe security, or this idea that the government's protecting your feelings or protecting your, I don't know, well-being somehow. Then that's what you're trading for. And a lot of times that's not to make the slippery slope fallacy, but that's how a lot of dictatorships have came to power over time.
You're definitely right, but I think that people, just like how you stated beforehand, people are very tribalistic within nature, and I think before I delve into that, I actually do like what Sophie's Tarot. Sorry, Sophie's Tarot A stated. My apologies, Sophie. My apologies. I would probably avoid your pronoun entirely and call you by your name. I don't think language should be controlled. Yeah. I think that is something that is absolutely beneficial when one interacts with another individual. That maybe sometimes the pronouns in and of themselves are being made to be too important when one interacts with another individual, and hence maybe there should be something different where it's just like, okay, well, maybe we should avoid certain pronouns, or just avoid pronouns in general, and just have the individual's name, because that is what that person represents, is their name, is not anything else or anything prior to, right? So I think that in itself is a very great way of moving forward, and maybe even moving past the issue in and of itself. So, Sophie, I think you're absolutely right based on your assessment. Okay, Linear. Hey, as long as you, hold on, let me just see this one. Hey, as long as you don't mind people doing that to you, it's all good. Got to be consistent. It's very true. It's very true. And I think that's what a lot of individuals kind of do, in a sense, is that they kind of say, well, I don't want that to happen. I don't want to call you this pronoun. And then somebody mistakens, I don't know, their pronoun or whatever the situation is, and they get all bent out of shape. And it's just like, you just like how Linear stated, you need to be consistent based on what you're bringing to the table. You can't be, this is the way that I want things, but as soon as that seems to turn on me, now I'm going to go up in arms, and so on and so forth. So you're absolutely right, Linear, as well. So that's the thing. And if anybody still has any questions, please throw the questions up, and we would love to actually get to your questions. If you don't, that's perfectly fine too. We'll just continue. I'm going to try to push it until 1:30, and after we'll close down. And
and it's that's, I look at that stuff as just pretty simple,
right?
And I look at things like culture handles all of this stuff right now. That's what culture is doing right now. Like us having this conversation, people having the conversation online. This is how we're talking about it and discussing it. And soon, my prediction is that words always change, and that we'll probably come up with new words for things at the end of the day. That may, in fact, happen. But if it does, it needs to be handled fairly from the culture, the people, the individuals should always be protected. And I just don't think that it's something that we need to force people to do or not do, vice versa. It's kind of like the same thing with the church and school. they shouldn't push one religion in school,
Right. Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right. I don't think that they should actually. Yeah, and this is just me, and this is where maybe we can have an entire show based on this too. But I think that schools should be completely secular. I think schools should kind of like
Mhm.
omit the necessity that any god should be stated at all. I think that what individuals should be caring about when they go to school isn't necessarily the God that they represent, but
Mhm.
the lectures that they're going into. And I
Mhm.
think that's what makes the school experience truly memorable. It's not that, okay, well, this school is underneath a Christian God, so henceforth every morning we need to get up for prayer or underneath any type of other God, right? Like
Mhm.
school is supposed to be for school. Things that are more personal need to stay at home, or there'll be places within the school that you can go within your own privacy to
Do
do
whatever.
your prayers and stuff, and nobody should be able to bother you with that.
I mean, I heard, I always understood God to be omnipresent. So I don't think you can take God out of school if he really existed, could you? Like, he's everywhere, right? But
That's true.
this is what they need to understand. Not everybody wants to be in the body of Christ. Like, I don't even find his body all that hot to begin with. And I definitely don't want Christ in me. Okay. That's just gross. It's nasty.
I get you. I get you as well. I'm in the same boat. But all in all, I think what needs to be brought forward is that there are certain things, like as you stated, when it comes to culture, these forums are great forums to have a back and forth in order to create a well-rounded way to tackle these type of questions,
Mhm.
to really bring them to the forefront, to educate people on whatever it may be, pronoun, way of being, whatever the situation is, and really
Mhm.
bring it to the table and have people question it, have people really uh, go into its properties in a sense and see, is this something that is beneficial for our society to carry, or is this something that should be kind of left behind in a sense?
Mhm.
And I think that that's really that's what it really comes down to. And I think that that's a huge point that people should be aiming for, at least, I
Yeah,
think.
absolutely, man. And because again, if you start opening up the prayer in school and the religion practice in school, you can't discriminate. So you're gonna have to let them all in. That means Satanists, that means they're gonna want to pray to Satan, and they're gonna want to why not bring those statues up and everything.
True.
So it just creates problems for themselves. You know what I mean?
No, you're absolutely right, and I think that the reality of the situation is that you can't be taking away others people's pies in a sense, and then you're eating your own without anybody sort of criticizing your own pie and trying to take that away from you afterwards, or whatever the situation is. So I think that all in all, when we truly delve into these type of conversations, I think they need to be on a level that is not based on anger, in a sense where people are talking sort of over each other rather than necessarily talking with each other, and really getting
Mhm.
down to the point where they think, this is the thing that we're having a discussion about. How does this thing affect the society that we are living in? And is it beneficial within the society and beneficial for the individuals who are trying to espouse this narrative? And if it's not, as I stated, you kind of leave it in the background. And if it is, well, you carry it along with you as language and as humans constantly evolve into newer generations. you
Mhm.
know? But one thing that I do have to say is that I am happy about young individuals being more vocal, where I find
Mhm.
that young individuals beforehand, and definitely in my day and in previous days, were more sort of let's not ask questions, let's not really combat individuals on how they interact with each other and so on and so
Mhm.
forth. And I think that's something that needs to change. I think that's something that this new generation is kind of bringing forward at this
Yeah.
moment. Now, don't get me wrong. Do I agree with everything that the new generation is bringing forward? No. But that's the beauty about freedom of speech is
Yeah.
that individuals are allowed to bring in nouveau languages and are not languages, but nouveau ways to speak in particular languages, and we kind of have that discussion to see if it's beneficial or
Mhm.
not. Absolutely. So, all in all, because I think that I'm going to close down a bit early, but before I do, is there any last second things that you wish to say to our audience?
No, I would just say, be sincere, be genuine in everything you do, be a responsible person for your own happiness and your joy in life. It's going to come from you. It ain't going to come from out there. And just maintain that positive spirit when you can, because I believe me, as you get older, you lose more and more of your positivity every day if you're not careful. So I
That
try
is
to tell
true.
jokes every day and make it fun. But boy, as years get on,
Yeah, it's the truth.
so
Sometimes you look at things and you're like, but okay, let's continue moving forward. Everything is good for now. So let's keep going. Family is
make the
good.
most of it. This is the only life you're gonna get. So
That's right.
make it count, man.
That's it. That's it. So, everybody, we are going to be shutting down now, but I would like to thank all of you for coming and watching this show. Thank you so much for your support. If you haven't liked or subscribed, please hit that like and subscribe button. And also, if you please check out conservative uh,
Principle,
value principles. Sorry,
principle.
conservative principles below on in the description. So if you go down in the description, conservative principles is right down there. Please check it out. It's a really good show and it's very informative because there's atheists of all spectrums there's atheists within all political spectrums, I was trying to say. And instead of trying to berate those individuals from left or right, we should try to bring those individuals together and really try to work with them. If they're not bigoted in certain ways, I mean, where it's not aversely bigoted, where they're kind of like, no, I don't wish to work with this individual because they are this color or because they are this denomination, because they have a perfectly fine right to state that. But I
Hmm.
have a perfectly fine right too to say, no, thank you. You can keep that to yourself and you're not
Hmm.
coming out. And so that's the beauty about freedom. But anyways, thank you all, Scott Williamson. Thank you so much, my friend, for coming on. You always
Hmm.
somebody who constantly helps me learn more things to come on and really think about certain perspectives that I think a lot of individuals don't necessarily think about. So, again, thank you so much for coming on. It's always been a pleasure. It's an honor to have you. And I hope that I can have you on for other shows in the
Oh,
future.
absolutely, man. And you're the same. You can come on my show anytime you want, man.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. I'm busy for quite some time,
Yep.
so that's why I only got the weekends mostly, in order to really work around things, but soon, hopefully, things are gonna
No
relax
doubt,
enough where
man.
I can have go on to people's shows and everything like that. But everybody, thank you so much. Again, please check out Conservative Principles down below in the description, and also, if you wish to help us on the Atheist Uprising, at the bottom of the description, there's a link to our Patreon page. It really does help bring great guests such as Scott Williamson on our show and also helps with our future projects that we wish to actually do. So with that, I want to say have a great night, everybody, and see you next weekend on the Atheist Uprising. See you all next time.